You to say that you didn't become aware to the harm using the N-word with a student until this incident?
Which incident are you referring to?
The incident that has us here this evening with student A.
With student A. Repeat that question for me, please.
Do I understand you to say that you didn't become aware of the harm using the N-word until this incident?
I mean, it can be a harmful word. There's no question about it.
Is that your understanding?
Yes.
Prior to this incident?
I'm still not clear on what exactly you're. This has been a harmful word ever since it
The next
began.
question I have is, do you believe that the regular use of the N-word by some students gives teachers the permission to use that word?
No. I mean, no.
Okay, thank you. Have you ever heard any of your athletes using the N-word during practices or warm-ups or games?
Not these guys, but I've heard other
Any of your
athletes.
athletes. Have you ever heard that being used in your presence?
Yes.
Did you ever take actions with those specific athletes similar to what you did in this incident?
Yes.
You mentioned, let's see, this is in Exhibit Romeo, Exhibit R, the second page of Exhibit R. In the first paragraph, you stated, I was not addressed.
This is not in evidence.
It's not. So- Is it the same Exhibit 4? Okay. What I was referring to is also in Exhibit 4, so I was just made aware.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
No, thank you, because I didn't know they didn't have that. In that exhibit, it stated that you were not addressing the other student that was in the office at the time. You stated also this evening that you had asked the other student about their cell phone. Is there a reason why you asked the other student in there about their cell phone?
Yes. When I turned in the green slip, the secretary was addressing the other student in the corner study carrel about a cell phone, and the secretary, asked the other student to bring it up to her or bring it up to her desk. And so I was just kind of going over to make sure that I was just going to, either help him get it there or make sure he had it put away.
Okay. And my final question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Is, if you feel you owe the student an apology, why do you feel you owe the student an apology if you believe you were doing your job?
Well, in the course of doing my job the way I thought I was supposed to do it, I harmed her or him. And so if I take ownership in that. So, teaching is human interaction, and it's not going to be perfect. It's not. And no matter how well we do our job, we can make mistakes. And, I've always taken ownership in anything. In a classroom, if I failed to tell my students something and they didn't succeed as well as they should have, I've told them. If we didn't anticipate something happening in a game, hey, that's my bad. I didn't cover that in practice. Here's how we're going to handle that. So, teaching is human interaction, and it's not going to be perfect. So if I make a mistake or if I don't do it correctly, then I'm going to correct it myself. I'm not going to rely on somebody else to.
Did you apologize for reading back the N-word to your other students when you read it back to them in the past reports that you have done, as you just stated?
I'm not sure I've ever had to do that, not with a racial slur. I have with certain other profanity.
Well, just to clarify, because when I asked the question about the N-word specifically being used in your presence with athletes, you said yes. And then I asked you, had you followed the same procedures with those athletes? You said yes.
I
So
think
my
you,
question, my follow-up question to that is, did you apologize to those athletes for using that word in their presence? Did you feel you needed to apologize?
well, I believe your question was, did I address it?
No, that was not my question.
Audience, please.
Can you read it back for me, please?
Well, why don't we just have her ask the question straight, just ask the question, answer the question, because the
Okay.
reporter's gonna have to go back many, many pages in the transcript at this point. So, you can continue to ask your question and, just try to answer it to the best of your ability.
Okay, I mean,
When the N-word was used in your presence with previous athletes,
yes, ma'am.
did you respond the same way you did in this incident?
No, I mean, I didn't write up a discipline referral. I went and addressed it, told them we're not going to use that word on the football field or whatever, and you know, usually there was some other type of consequence. It wasn't handled through student administration.
Is there a reason why it was not handled through?
I think usually what happens is administrators respect the decisions of the coaches or the you know, the sponsors, and they just expect them to make sure that our students are making good choices and make sure that our students understand what they can and cannot do as far as language in that arena. And, you know, we kind of handle it ourselves. And, you know, it's not going to take an administrator real long to realize that if you don't handle it, it's going to get out of control and it's not going to be a good reflection of your school or school district. So in the athletic realm, we usually just kind of handle it out there on the field or on the court or something like that. We don't go through the administration process after school hours. Do you understand?
If I understand you correctly, the way that this incident is handled amongst athletes is different than what it's handled inside of our buildings.
I think in the classroom, I think there's a process, and I think when you're on the field playing, then it's not necessarily conducive to handling it like you would in the classroom. And it's not my policy, it's not my expectation, it's just kind of what I've learned in the 27 years in this district.
Thank you.
Board Member Campbell.
Mr. Oswald, when you read the green slip back to her, which is identified in Exhibit 2, Paragraph 2, do you believe that you were in violation of Board Policy GBCB, Sections 2 and 10?
No.
And help me with that.
Well, I felt like I was doing my job. I was being professional. I was being courteous. I was thought that in the course of correcting this young lady who had displayed the behavior on the mezzanine, that I just felt like I was doing my job and just trying to make sure I was confirming what she had said. And, you know, in the course of my responsibilities as a teacher, I felt like I was just doing what I had always done and what I was told to do and how to do it. So if I'd always done that, then, and no one said anything different, then why would, maybe I didn't understand why this time would be different.
And as a follow-up to that, with Board Policy GBH, the first sentence of that, staff members are expected to maintain courteous and professional relationships with students. Again, same question. Do you feel like you were in violation of that?
I felt like I was being as professional and courteous as I could. You know, I try to be mindful of the students that I'm dealing with and their differences. And so I was cautious in what I was doing. I was processing with student A, and before I went over there, I was thinking about making sure that I spoke simply so that she could understand. And I know there are times when, as adults, we communicate with younger teens that the communication can get misunderstood or misinterpreted. And I was just trying to be exact and use firm words. In other words, you know, don't you know, go around or skirt the issue. I was just trying to be exact on what happened and what I believe she said, and I wanted to give her the opportunity that if that is not what she said, that she was able to tell me that that was not correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell.
Board Member Sparks.
To follow up on Board Member Marshall's question, I believe it is your testimony, please correct me if I'm misspeaking, that the way that you have disciplined the athletes that played football or any of the other sports that you coach, because you said that you coached many different sports, correct?
Sure.
I don't want to assume that it was just football. But you stated that you basically handled that within the confines of the team compared to taking it to building administrators, correct?
Yeah, I think it's just, you know, it's an individual basis. It's not necessarily a team rule or, you know, what have you. I think just the individual coaches, if they hear it, you know, sometimes you don't know who said it. I mean, it's in the course of play,
Okay.
you know, and you're unsure. You don't know. And they don't readily admit it, you know, with a helmet on or pads on or whatever. And we just address it as a general rule. Hey, whoever said that, no more. You know, we don't use that word out here. And so sometimes we don't know who to discipline, you know? I don't know if I answered your question, I'm sorry.
Earlier, I asked the question, if a student had repeated the word through a song, would you have disciplined them? You stated yes.
I recall that.
And you stated that you would have disciplined them through the same process that student A was disciplined. Do you agree with that?
Potentially. I mean, every situation is different, you know, potentially.
But a racial slur is a racial slur.
Yes.
Do you believe that it is fair to discipline one student for a racial slur different than another student for the same offense?
Repeat that again. I want to make sure I understand.
If you have two students that did the same thing, which in this instance, a racial slur being spoken, repeated, sang, song, whatever, would you have disciplined them the same, or would it have been determined by if they are on a sports team or if they are in the cafeteria?
I mean, I really don't know how to answer that because some of it's hypothetical. I mean, if it's in the classroom and I hear it, I have to address it.
Okay, let me make it not hypothetical for you.
Okay.
We have a student that is currently student A
Yes.
that was taken to the office
Yes.
for using a racial slur, correct?
Yes.
You also have disciplined a student on one of your teams for using a racial slur, correct?
I probably have.
I actually would like a solid answer so that the entire board can understand. either you have had the situation happen of using a racial slur and you discipline them outside of this situation, or you have not. And I think that is something that's very important for us to understand as a board.
I mean, honestly, I mean, I know that, you know, you hear language on the field. Now, have I specifically disciplined a specific kid on the field?
Have you heard a student
Can't recall.
say the N-word
Yes,
on your team?
yes.
Did you discipline them?
Well, I may have heard a student, but I don't know who it was.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not trying to avoid the question, Mr. Spark. I'm just trying to say, you know, if there's a situation in the classroom and it, you know, it's disrupting the learning environment, you have to address that.
If you don't remember, I totally understand.
Yeah, I mean, I know in general, you know, you hear those words and you know, all right, who said it, you know? But I can't recall a specific time where I heard the word, knew who said it, and took some type of corrective action. I just can't recall.
I have two more questions.
Yes.
The first question that I have is, do you believe that any racial slur should be utilized in LSR 7?
No.
My last question, you said in your testimony that you want to be mindful, you said considerate, and you also said you want to be exact when it came to your reporting on your discipline records. Do you feel repeating the word was being mindful and being considerate?
I think that in some aspects, if I'm trying to make sure before I accuse a student of saying something that they didn't say, that I give them the opportunity to say that they didn't say it. Now, moving forward, I'm not going to say that word in this instance. So, I mean, I would be mindful. I would be considerate. But in the context of May 6th, I thought I was just doing what I was supposed to do and how I'd always done it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Board Member Marshall.
Thank you. What training did you receive that gave you the instruction to handle these matters with athletes differently than non-athletes?
No training. I mean, it's just,
Thank you.
there's no training.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any further questions from the board? Council, at this point, it would be time if you have further questions for the witness. Would it actually be Mr. McDormand if you have any?
No further
Okay,
questions.
Ms. Basie.
Just a couple. I think we established in the stipulation that your interaction with student A is the basis for the charges. Is that correct?
I think the basis for the charges was me processing the green slip, which I was doing so with student A.
With student A. And Dr. Sharp did ask you about that interaction with student A, correct?
Yes, he did.
And Dr. Carlson also asked you about that interaction with student A, is that correct?
Yes, that's all the interview was about.
You stated that a student repeating a slur from a song would warrant discipline. Is that correct?
I think it would.
But you repeating a word that a student said does not warrant discipline.
Well, I mean, I'm an adult. I'm a teacher. I'm trying to do the the process of making sure that what I am referring this student to student administration for, to the assistant principal, make sure that she said what I believe she said. We all had masks on. And I didn't want to accuse her of doing something that she didn't do.
I have no further questions.
Good. Okay, if there's no further questions, Mr. Hatley.
Well, Mr. Oswald can remain in the room, so.
And,
Murdoch,
yes, sir.
I'm going to recall Dr. Carlson,
Okay,
a lot of some of these questions.
okay. Are we at that point where we can go ahead and do that? Okay.
Am I excused?
You are excused, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murdoch.
While we're waiting for Dr. Carlson, I don't know if you anticipate offering any additional exhibits, but this might be a good time just to confirm the ones that we have in, if you have a second. I show as admitted Administration Exhibit 1, 2, 4,
Joe, you
5.
have to speak up. I can't.
Okay. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 11.
Those are hers.
Was Exhibit 10 not admitted? No, it was not. Okay.
You referenced it, but it wasn't admitted.
I'll
If
entertain
you
a
want to
motion.
offer it, that's no problem.
I'd like to offer Exhibit 10 into evidence.
No objection.
Thank you.
Exhibit 10 is admitted. And then, Mr. Oswald, at this point, I have exhibits K, L, M, R, R, and SS.
You said A-L, I thought,
K, K,
K-L-M.
K, L, M, and then R, R, and SS.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, the other ones, I made notes of what they referenced, she admitted, the other ones we have,
Yeah, so we're good.
yeah.
I believe that's correct.
We're square? Okay.
Okay, Dr. Carlson, you were asked to come back here, and so we will start with Mr. McDormand.
Thank you. Dr. Carlson, I know you think we've done this ad nauseum, but with respect to Exhibit 4,
I have it.
all right? Does pages 1 through 11 constitute your complete file on your investigation? And if it's 12, that's fine, I wasn't sure.
Through Bates stamp 13,
Through 13?
correct.
Now, you did interview by phone the parent of student JH, is that right?
Yes,
Did you interview student A's parents or guardians?
no,
Why not?
because student A's account was already in the building administration notes, and I had that investigation. And after reviewing it, I didn't see anything else that needed to be asked or cleared up, and I wanted JH to have an opportunity to have their voice in the conversation.
So can I also presume then there was no contact made to the district by the parents or guardians of student A with respect to the incident with Mr. Oswald?
I don't know if you'd be assuming correctly or not.
Well, certainly there'd be a record of it somewhere, wouldn't there? If there'd been like an email or a phone call that, like, Mr. H did.
I don't have that, if that occurred.
You're not aware of it either, are you?
No, I know that the building administration worked with student A and the parent, but I can't speak to substantively what that was.
Well, like we know that the parent of student JH requested the immediate termination of Mr. Oswald. Did you get any type of request for any type of action against Mr. Oswald by the parents or guardian of student A?
No.
Okay, bear with me just a moment. Look at Exhibit 9, please.
I have it.
All right. And I believe that this is staff conduct. This is board policy GBCB, am I correct?
Yes, you are.
In the two paragraphs that were part of the charges against my client are paragraph 2 and 10, is that right?
Are you referencing the charges?
Yes.
Which exhibit is that? 2?
It's number 2.
Yes, 2 and 10
right.
are listed there.
Now, within both 2 and 10, it says employees will not be disciplined for speech that is protected by law. You see that?
Yes, I do.
Now, if you would believe Mr. Oswald and the other teachers here that have said that they have been instructed to repeat back the words that are said verbatim to the student, would not that speech be protected by law?
Objection to the extent it calls for a legal conclusion.
I would sustain that objection without further foundation.
Well, can you tell me, as to 2 or 10, what speech then that these two paragraphs relate to that is protected by law in this district? What speech does a teacher have that is protected by law?
Same objection.
And I'll sustain that, and also, Mr. McDormand, I don't know that, I'll strike that. But yeah, I think that question is calling for a legal conclusion by a witness.
I'm not asking for legal, I'm asking for any source that I can know what this is.
Well, I've sustained the objection, so if you want to re-ask a question or ask a different question, please.
Can you tell me of an instance that you're aware of in your experience here that something a teacher said was deemed to be protected under this statute?
Objection, there's no statute here.
Well, I'm sorry, under these two paragraphs, excuse me.
Examples would be First Amendment speech. We have new guidelines in the state of Missouri as far as whistleblower law in Missouri statute. Those would be the types of things that I think, are what you're asking, would be protected.
Anything else?
Same objection, it calls for legal conclusion.
Sustained.
Those are the ones that come to mind right now.
Nothing further.
Oh, sorry.
Ms. Basie?
I don't have any questions.
Board members, do you have any final questions for Dr. Carlson? Or do we give our board members another chance? Okay, Board Member Marshall.
Thank you. Dr. Carlson, I have 2 questions. Do we have a district policy allowing coaches to determine their own discipline for use of racial slurs by student athletes?
Want to make sure I heard you. Allowing coaches to determine,
You may repeat the question?
please.
Do we have a district policy that allows coaches to determine their own discipline for use of racial slurs by student athletes?
Not that I'm aware of. Our athletic handbooks do have some guidelines in there, but
Okay.
not that I'm aware of.
Has the district provided any training to coaches on how to discipline student athletes who use racial slurs outside of what is provided to other staff in the district?
Our coaches also do safe schools trainings through the platform we use. As far as specific trainings, those would be done through the athletics office for our coaches, through Mr. Burchard's office. So can't speak to specifically what they've done recently, but we do have all of our coaches complete safe schools trainings. They're responsible for board policies as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Carlson? Okay, thank you, sir. I believe that means you are released. Is that correct? Since they, oh, I'm sorry, Board Member Sparks.
Sorry, I was trying to find the page. Dr. Carlson, I just have one question for you. I believe that you stated in your first go-around that you was in here, that after your investigation was kind of gathered and these facts were kind of listed, that you gave everyone an opportunity to kind of review what was listed to kind of confirm that basically you're not being misquoted, that you're not misquoting the person that you was interviewing. Is that correct?
That is my process for doing investigations, and specifically in this situation, I did go through my notes with Mr. Oswald after we were completed with the investigation.
Okay.
And he reviewed my notes and added any changes, modifications, recommendations to make sure they were accurate.
Were there any changes made?
I generally recall some clarifications and such, and those would be represented here because this is the final version of those notes.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Allen.
What tab is that under? 5, okay, under tab 5. 5? Is that right? Where the bullets and all of that? 4? All right, Dr. Carlson, I'm just back to this time frame thing. When was that then discussed? When you said we reviewed all of these things, was that on the 12th you sat down and said, here are my bulleted points, or was that more on the 19th or more on the 27th?
So my meeting with Mr. Oswald was May 12th at 3:30 p.m. here at SLC, and it was at the end of that meeting that afternoon of May 12th that I reviewed my notes with him. And my method for doing that is I turned my computer to Joe and went line by line through my notes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay.
Does anyone anticipate the need to call Dr. Carlson again? Sorry.
I don't.
No.
All right, Dr. Carlson, you're released. You may remain in the room or go home or go wherever you'd like at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Carlson. Either counsel, do you have any other witnesses that you are going to call before closing statements?
No, I would like, since we've gone a little longer than I thought, a 5-minute break, been here a little over 9 hours, and I need a few moments to even think about my closing.
Let's confirm that there will be no further witnesses first.
I don't have any further witnesses either.
Okay.
Okay, we will take a 5-minute recess and then come back for the closing arguments. Okay, sir? Okay, we are going to continue here. First off, to both councils, thank you. At this time, the board is going to hear brief closing arguments. We are allowing up to 10 minutes for each attorney to speak. Ms. Basie will go first, then Mr. McDormand, and then Ms. Basie will be allowed the last word in a rebuttal. Please note, Ms. Basie, that your rebuttal time does count against those 10 minutes. So the first part of your argument would need to be shorter than that. At this time, we would allow Ms. Basie to present the administration's closing argument.
Thank you. You all have heard a lot of information tonight, but the relevant facts are undisputed. Mr. Oswald said the N-word twice in the presence of students. Mr. Oswald knew the word was offensive and shouldn't be said. As demonstrated through the testimony and the exhibits, his conduct was a willful violation of board policy and immoral conduct, specifically a willful violation of policy GBCB and GBH as it relates to maintaining professional and courteous relationships with students. Mr. Oswald has acknowledged that he recognizes that just hearing the N-word can be harmful, and he said it anyway, twice. Building administrators have testified tonight that it is not an expectation that teachers read back to students what is on a referral. And in fact, there's been testimony that there are times when that does not happen and that the administration does an investigation. And that's the role of the administrators there. So it is not an expectation. Current board policies and the training that was described here tonight do make clear that staff are not to engage in conduct that could be construed as discrimination, as harassment, that staff are to build and maintain those courteous and professional relationships with students. Dr. Sharp listed a significant amount of training related to racial awareness, racial sensitivity, resources that he made available to staff. We should not have to specifically tell teachers not to use the N-word in the presence of students. That is already covered in your current policies and in the training that has been provided. There has been a lot of testimony tonight about positive testimony about Mr. Oswald's character and the impact he's had on students. But there are also 2 kids at issue in this situation who have suffered harm and who Mr. Oswald has recognized could have been harmed by his words. And that's the reason that we are here tonight, and that is the reason that Dr. Buck has recommended termination. He considers this a serious violation, serious misconduct, and his priority is protecting the welfare of the district students. And that's why we're here tonight, and he's brought these charges to the board for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Basie. Mr. McDormand?
Thank you. First of all, board members, I want to express on behalf of my client, Joe Oswald, your attention to this. We've been going on now nearly 9.5 hours. And it's important that we do that and that we did that. But I want to thank you. I also want to say this. If there's anything that I've done tonight that offends any of you, first of all, I'm sorry. But more importantly, hold that against me and not against my client. I've sat where you all sat. I was on the school board for 12 years. I am amazed at, and this is, I'm not trying to sound disrespectful, but it appears to me there's a total disconnect between your administrators and your staff. I'm sorry, but I can't see it any other way. Building administrators are saying it's very clear what our policy is. You don't repeat it. We had 7 other instructors get up and tell you that that's what they've been told by administration, is to repeat it back verbatim. The other thing you've got to ask yourself is, if that's just a micro part of this and it's different, why didn't we hear from any staff member that agreed with what the administration is saying? That everyone knew, but these 8, we can say, that you were not to repeat back if it's a racial slur. And what I don't understand, and I hope you as board take note of this, to tell someone after 27 years of service to your district, obviously impacted a lot of students that we've seen here tonight too, in a positive way, is why isn't there anything in writing? What are we afraid of? I don't understand that. If it's important enough, and I'm not discounting that at all, that we don't use a racial slur, wouldn't you have thought there'd been one email, one memo? And instead we're just told, in violation as is set out in GBCB. Where in the world does it say anything about racial slurs in GBCD? Where does it say anything in any of your policies about that? These are intelligent people. They've got lots of education. All you got to do is tell them. I think they'll do it. I think they have done it. But to now basically come up and say, all right, you have maintained a current professional relationship. Well, there was nothing that was shown that he yelled or screamed at the child. He was carried in doing that. And I'm extremely disappointed in the administration, because what they've told me from the beginning is the issue with this other student is gone because we could not interview them, and we're looking only at the 2 instances of what he said to student A. And that's what the stipulation said, based solely on that. Yet they keep bringing around, we've harmed 2 children. But you know what? They haven't interviewed that other child. There's no evidence of that. Yet they're hiding behind that. Obviously, the easiest thing to do is what Dr. Bucks decided to do, and that's to terminate Mr. Oswald. You know, I carried a heavy burden coming in here tonight, not because I knew this man as well as these young men did. I didn't have that. It's because I knew his father over there, because we've shared the same profession for over 46 years together. And he called me and asked me, Mike, would you represent my son? And because I knew Ken Oswald and knew what he stood for, I said yes in a minute. If he had not called me, and I knew Joe Oswald like I've learned to